We've known about the threshold in the sky for centuries. We wanted to see what the birds saw. The eagle is our symbol. First, we went where the eagle went and found thresholds beyond the eagle. We went faster and higher. We took our incredible new speed close to the ground. The threshold, the ultimate edge. No matter where we find it, that's where we must go. We all know the peculiar fascination of the threshold. Tell us to avoid it, and we ignore the warnings. That's the way it is. The edge of the cliff is where we will go. If we don't accept the challenge, we may never know what we can do. A threshold always asks the question, can you do this? Right from the beginning, let's not think about heroic figures. Open your mind. This is about men. This is people doing the very best they can at a job they do every day. These are people no different in many ways from their fellows, except that they have lost at least one human habit, the habit of complacency. Aviation is so totally unforgiving. It has limits which we know and can describe, but it is so intensely human to seek the limits we cannot describe. Demonstration flying, the most demanding of all sports. There are only a dozen men in the world who play this game in this particular hair-raising way. Fewer than 100 who have ever played it. It's riskier than bullfighting or mountain climbing, and its skills involve a most extreme form of precision, which often shows up most clearly in emergencies which nobody anticipated. Everything you are about to see is the way it happens. Nothing staged, nothing faked. As you see it, that's the way it is.
J.D. Davis, now in the United States racing team, the Blue Angels. The precision maneuvers you will see demonstrated here this afternoon are coordinated techniques. These maneuvers might be flown from treetop level to 60,000 feet. But for the team, it is a continuous demonstration of their skill and training in a very low altitude environment. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if I may direct your attention on the ramp just before us.
I think everyone gets considerably worked up prior to an air show. It's similar to any type of performance, except that we're performing before anywhere between 4 and 6 million people a year. And at one time, you can have anywhere from, I suppose, 20 to 30,000 people, upwards to 1 million.
Will team up to start the power plant systems of our aircraft. The noise level may become too high. You hear exactly.
I personally am able to put out of my mind the fact that this crowd is down there and they are observing. When I am in the aircraft, as soon as the engines are started, the business begins, just like a stage show or rehearsal. You have rehearsed it and done it so many times that you're able to withdraw yourself from this emotional involvement and enter it as a professional.
The main reason that you strive so hard to put on a good show, not only a good show, but the best show that you've ever put on. Each time that you appear is the whole essence of the Blue Angel tradition, and that you have had very, very fine teams go before you, and you'll have fine teams come after you, and it's the tradition of the whole thing that calls for putting on your absolute top performance each time you go out.
Concentration is the whole secret to the air show. You must concentrate 100% and, if possible, 110% of the time. You have to continuously talk to yourself, continuously force yourself not to become complacent, to work as hard as you possibly can, and to accept nothing but perfection. I have the position where I have all the other airplanes in sight at all times, and the scary thing is when you see somebody starting to move, or if it's in turbulent air, you see somebody bouncing around a little bit. And when you look up at the wingtips, and you could say, well, if he moves much more, he might bump airplanes.
We have a saying that we've never flown a perfect air show. We probably never will. So there's always something in an air show that you're not too happy with. But what I look for is the fact that you've got to always know where the ground is. You've always got to work within your own capabilities. Never try to work outside of them. If the first time you do, you're going to bust it.
Personally, when I'm strapping in the airplane, the thing I start thinking about is getting myself mentally prepared for my dirty roll, which is the first solo maneuver that I do. It's probably the one that's most difficult. You're trying to do that maneuver low, but not too low.
If you've trained right and you know what you're doing, you shouldn't really scare yourself that often. You shouldn't scare yourself every air show. It's maybe 1 in 5.
Smoke on. Smoke off. Stand by on the canopies. Canopies, come loose.
Chariots of the gods. It's easy to think of these big metal beasts that way, and the men in them tend to lose touch with the rest of us. But they're still men, and not all that different. What they've done is to find a new way to test our limits. They cross a threshold and return to tell about it.
On the runway now, the Blue Angel diamond in fingertip formation. Commander Hall calling the pilots to 100% power as each pilot carefully checking the engine instruments one final time prior to their brake release. The pilots now, satisfied that their aircraft are ready to go, acknowledge to Commander Hall with a thumbs up, and he in turn calling for afterburners on now.
Burners on now. Water off. I'll go flash up. Just try to get down. Okay. Ease on the bar. Ease on the bar. Burners off. Stand by for the brakes. Brakes. You're up, Steve. Yeah, okay.
Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, back to our right, Blue Angel number 5. Watch carefully. Upon becoming airborne with the landing gear and flaps extended, Steve will roll that aircraft 360 degrees while airborne.
You're on your back looking down at that runway thinking there's no way I'm going to make it. And then you pull out and you say, boy, I'm not going to do that again. And sure enough, the next day went right out and did it again.
Back to the right once again, and a very precise transition. Watch carefully as Skip retracts the landing gear and flaps, accelerates his aircraft at 280 miles per hour, performing the very, very graceful Immelman on takeoff. Up through the vertical now, relaxing the pressure on the stick and floating his aircraft over the top, literally hanging in his straps as he rolls that aircraft 180 degrees.
We come off the high-performance climb, we come out of afterburner, and we put the speed brakes out. The formation seems to set itself, and I kind of slouch down into my old familiar position, body position in the cockpit, and I set myself, and now the air show is on.
At only an altitude of 100 feet over the ground, a pass on the flight line to give you a real close look at the complete wing overlap and the 36-inch wingtip to canopy separation which exists in the Blue Angel Diamond. That same formation which we will see accelerating to more than 500 miles per hour.
Now, plus 10 hovering. All right, got this there. Over at 67. Easing the power. Water on. Hey, suck it to him, gang. $250. You have to look outside, then. 300. Be right on the outside edge, Ernie. Okay, 350, hurry on my right, yep. Okay, Kevin, beyond the taxiway, ski. Piece of cake, boss. All right, easy the power at 400. Take it out, boss. Bring it down, bring it down.
Yeah, I could hear all three of the other aircraft. We were no more than about 10 feet wingtip to wingtip on the boss, and I could see Jim and Kevin as they crossed. They weren't more than 10 to 15 feet above me.
Pull it, Kev. Pull it, Dave. Smoke off, coming right, very nice.
Coming off the flight line as you're breaking back towards the rendezvous, you're saying to yourself, well, that was good. That was damn good.
He's clear, yes, clear. Attaboy, attaboy.
And if you have a good cross off the opener, why then it's electric between the cockpits. Everybody realizes that they've got a good one going. And you kind of get the feeling in your mind, well, I've only got 23 more maneuvers to do. You know, don't blow it now. I got to get her going.
Okay, take it down just a little bit. Little bar, little bar. Little jump. Let's hit it.
More than 500 miles per hour as they streak for that single point of crossing just on the flight line before us.
Normally on a, let's say a knife edge pass, we'll cross within one wingspan of one another, one plane width, which is 20 to 30 feet apart. But occasionally, if the visibility is exceptionally good, we have one another in sight quite a long ways out. Especially on a knife edge, we may cross within 2, 3, 4 feet of one another.
Oh, good collision effect. You just missed a good collision effect then.
For every maneuver,
there's a cutoff point where you can finish the maneuver safely, where you go beyond that point and it's questionable whether you can finish the maneuver, and you go beyond that, and especially, let's say, in the case of a loop, whether you know it or not, you can't finish the maneuver.
Okay, hold what you got, Jeff. I'm float. Keep that coming in, Kevin. Looks good, started in, Jeff. Easing the power. Let's bring it in, guys. Let's drive it right in. Hustle, Jeff. Add it, boss, add it. Good, now bring it on in. Bring it in. Looks good, right on in. Okay, boss, take it out of the weeds.
If you watch an air show that is done correctly, it looks like it's something that is so easy that anyone can do it. This is one of the things that we find with the new people coming aboard. They cannot fly smoothly 2 to 4 feet from another aircraft. They don't realize that that is total and utter concentration, blocking out all else. That little world that they live in is a little spot on that aircraft that's about 3 inches wide, and they must remain in that spot at all costs.
Is such a point that you're working so hard that you can't really think about the flying. You're just sitting there looking at a wingtip, hanging on for dear life, and saying, "Okay, I've got to do this right," and look out, the wing's coming down, or Jim or Kevin are getting a little bit out of position, to call them up back into position, start thinking about the next maneuver, talking to the boss about whether the air is too rough, we ought to ease it out a little bit, or you know, the terrain, whether we're flying too low at the bottom of maneuvers. You don't think about the flying. That's just something that's happening. You're thinking about how to move that stick around, and that's just about it.
Then you have the two solos, which is a completely different type of a show in that we attempt to show the high-performance characteristics of the aircraft that we're flying.
And there he is on the flight line. Watch carefully. Landing gear and flaps extended at an airspeed of only 250 miles per hour. Steve will now pull back in the stick and drive that aircraft, Blue Angel number 5, straight up into the vertical.
How's it look, Jim? Steve's vertical. Okay, you shouldn't have any problem then. That's very interesting, boss. I just got down to 49 from the top of that son of a... Are you still alive? Yeah, but I was scared.
The average individual who has never observed aviation can go to an air show and become completely involved in what they are seeing, to the point that they are emotionally affected to tears. You get that lump in your throat, and your palms get sweaty, and it's just something that comes upon the crowd, and it's very difficult to define.
Make no mistake about the precision. In the violent buffeting of 600-mile-an-hour slipstreams and uncertain currents of the upper air, each man performs as part of a single expression. If one moves, all move. If the move is wrong, that mistake shoots through the entire formation. When it is precisely correct, it is a contest of beauty. That's the most important contest between pilot and the art of flying itself.
360. 350. 360 coming left, back to back.
I think the most uncomfortable maneuver we do is the back-to-back pass where I'm upside down and number 6 is on my wing right side up. And then we slow down, we put the gear down. Relatively slow speed, low altitude, inverted is a rather unusual flight attitude. Most people aren't used to being into it, and that is slightly uncomfortable just because it's unusual, I think.
Something happens out here at the edge of human-machine capability. When we reach this edge in any way, it's always artistry. That may well be the ultimate definition of artistry. The definition may exist only in this total and utter concentration, the small universe where perfection lives. We all recognize this place. Each time we reach it, we learn something new about what it means to be human. Don't mistake the nature of the risk of this experience. At more than 500 miles per hour, we're moving 800 feet per second. The two solo planes roaring toward each other are closing at 1,600 feet per second. If each of them is off by only 1 second, they can displace their crossing point by 4 city blocks. The flicker of an eyelid can mean the difference between beauty and tragedy.
Oh, here we go again. 2, 3, 4.
It's just beautiful to know that all this work that has been put into a performance, you have one heck of a lot of accomplishment to see your aircraft up there performing like it does.
It's very, very gratifying, and I'm sure that if you talk to each and every one of the maintenance people, that they feel the same way.
It's a hell of a responsibility, really. You have a man's life in your hands.
the Delta Loop. Those trees don't bother you down there, do they, Joe?
He will drive us down until Ernie says, no lower, boss. And at that time, he will say, don't go low.
Damn it. What's wrong? You scared me. You like putting me in the weeds, don't you, boss? We go. Okay, rolling out at 300. Stand by for the gear. Gear. Okay, let's start easing the power. Coming left for the echelon landing, easing the power. Good. Good, down a lock. Ship down lock. And Ernie's down a lock. The wind ought to be coming just a little bit of left to right. It should help us out here. Okay, start taking up some positions. Want to go to a beam, Ernie? At it, boss. Right on in, right on into a beam. Gotta come into you just a little bit. Okay. And just a little power now. Shoot. Sticks back. And you're at the position, Kev? Same damn thing on my shoot that time. We're good, we're good. Don't turn it in yet, boss. The stars haven't got stopped yet. Even phone, boss. Time to go. Looks good. Yeah, betcha. A little bit of brakes here. And you're a little close to the boss, Kevin. Okay, babe. I'm sorry. Okay, no problem.
Demonstration flying, like Grand Prix racing, attracts people who have both the courage and resources to confront the most cruel and central reality of high risk, namely that people get killed by the sport. It is not true, though, that we come to see the sportsman die, that this is what attracts us to watch. We come rather to see men survive the gamble. We don't cheer the bull, we cheer the matador.
Canopy is open.
The pilots, when we recover them from after an air show, are physically beat. I've seen them in 40-degree weather crawl out of the cockpit and they're just wringing wet.
It's a tremendous amount of nervous tension that is exerted throughout the flight, demanding of yourself the perfection that you're looking for. It's quite a taxing thing, I think, mentally, which manifests itself into a physical thing. You're completely exhausted at the end of a flight demonstration.
After an air show that I consider a good air show, I get a feeling of a lot of self-satisfaction. I feel very, very good. It's amazing how you reach almost a state of giddiness or ecstasy, I guess. You really feel good. You know, you've gone out there and you've really worked hard, and you have an exceptionally good air show. It's just yahoo.
A handshake. It's the touch of unity among the Blues. They have found out together what it is to assemble a group that adds up to more, much more than the sum of its parts.
At first, you're so tense that, you know, your hand is shaking and you don't want to appear to be that way in front of a crowd.
There you go. All right. What?
We, of course, maintain the always cheerful expression, even though sometimes after an air show you don't really feel like having an autograph signing period. However, that's all part of the job.
That is our main function, is to meet the people, to then impress upon them that there actually is a human being in that airplane.
It's a very necessary part of the job, and we all realize that. However, sometimes with the mental and physical strain that you've just gone through for 45 minutes, you sometimes would like to just go sit down in a cool, dark room and have a glass of ice water.
I find that a lot of times I'll approach the crowd and I have an awful lot of trouble writing my signature from the standpoint of making it legible. My hand just sits there and shakes for a while.
Sometimes you're very, very happy to just sit out there all afternoon and you reach a rapport with the crowd and you really hate to leave.
Give me 3 ranks. Who's the senior man on that crew? I don't believe that. Roland? I want you to give me 1 man out of that crew to help Harvey. Okay, if he's not around before you shut down, you ain't jacked up yet, don't shut down without him. The way it goes right now, we will hang the tanks tonight, but we won't fuel them or check them out. If you go ahead and be careful about it and not pop those O-rings, sometimes you can't help it. But just a little bit of preventive maintenance there and be careful about it, it's going to save us a lot of trouble.
When we're on the road traveling, and we have a gripe or discrepancy, it has to be taken care of for the reason of this type flying. And sometimes it's just not a small job, and there's no way around it other than just to do the job.
In order to fly a 6-airplane show, when you only have 6 airplanes to start with and you don't have any spares, it requires a fantastic effort as far as logistics and maintenance.
I couldn't follow my father's footsteps. I left home when I was young. I wandered free until a woman made me a prison of her love. The locks were eyes as pale as ghosts. The bars were her two lips of fire. The walls were arms that held me close. The chains were my desire. Oh, she won't let go. I gave her everything, and she asked for more. And Lord, I need her so. There's not a thing in the world I would trade her
Maintenance on the airplanes is sometimes a gigantic effort because the men will stay there and they'll work all night if necessary, a couple nights in a row, in order to have the planes ready for the show the next day.
Yeah, it's spelled out more often than I think we realize it, because you'll see men working 24 hours, 30 hours to get a job done. And these same men don't do it just once, they do it many times.
Your body can just withstand just so much. And we live normally about 3/4 tired all the time.
So this is where pride really comes in. It really shows. Like I said, a lot of times there's a lot of other things that men would rather be doing. They're probably out there working on an aircraft, but this is their primary thing, and that's about it.
And I've seen this happen a couple times where they worked all night one night and we got the show out, 6-airplane show. Came back with another huge problem and they worked all night the next night, but they get the job done. And obviously flying in the environment we fly in with very little margin for error. I leave a little bit of margin for my own personal error in there, but we leave no margin for catastrophic aircraft failure.
The circus? Yes, we all know about that. The flying circus. Wooden planes and iron men. But this is something else. Barnum and Bailey was never like this. Packing now to take this show on the road. What would your grandfather have thought if he could have watched these tents being folded?
How did it feel? Explanation 2512, is that right, Steve?
Yes, sir. Those masks haven't done nothing to do any good. We went over them.
Our biggest problem will be on aircrafts 1, 2, and 3, 5, and 6, a utility failure on the tanker. In the event we have this problem, stay on the tanker if you can with the probe extended, and have them swing around, toboggan you back on down, and stay on him just as long as you possibly can. Okay, we'll all abort back at that time, and we'll all be giving assistance as much as we possibly can on how much fuel to go, jettisoning drop tanks and things of that nature while you're on him. For Ernie, you've got the air system.
This circus is starting on the long road to Hawaii, but the planes carry only enough fuel to go halfway. It means that 2 times en route, flying tankers must be found. Gas stations in the sky. They're out there somewhere. They must be found. Otherwise, it's a long way from shore.
Okay, we got 50 miles to get in and start taking fuel, or else we're in a port.
We have an aircraft go in the water for any reason. We'll continue on track with our 2 remaining aircraft, switch into VHF guard frequency, which is 121.5, transmitting to any aircraft airliners that happen to be in the vicinity with an absolute fix, attempting to get a hold of Ocean Station November, who will be the primary rescue vessel, and he will undoubtedly be the only one that you'll be interested in the water unless there's another ship in the shipping lanes. If it occurs prior to the tanking evolution being completed, our 130 will go down with you, put out his large life raft for you and extra survival equipments. You should be in pretty good shape. They should be able to fix your spot precisely. You will undoubtedly be in the water there for at least 8 hours in this business, so you want to get yourself into your raft as soon as you can and get yourself comfortable so you are exposed to the elements as little as possible. You spend the night in that raft, you want to bundle yourself up just as warm as you can, or you'll end up dying of exposure. Any questions?
The biggest problem in moving the team to Hawaii was the fact that the distance involved required 2 in-flight refuelings at high altitude and high gross weight. To slow the F-4 down to 200 knots is an extremely difficult task to keep it in the sky at that speed.
Jim.
I think the only apprehension that I had personally on bringing an airplane over here is that if something would go wrong with the airplane, you'd have to eject from the airplane out at sea. It'd be tough pinpointing your position so that you could get a rescue craft to you. You never worry about having to get out. I think you worry about once you get out, then what?
This is just another working day. This is every Monday morning played full volume. If you know your job, you know the routine. But here you have come to know that each encounter with routine can bring something new. How would it be, though, if you had to deal with that newness right at the edge of eternity? When you go out on this human experience, daring that final edge without a net, you are alone, but together. Solo, but still a team. At this edge, you are participating in an extraordinary harmony. And you never forget, it takes more than a single note to make harmony. Don't look for heroes here. These are men who feel elation, fear, frustration, joy. Every one of us goes with them, at least in spirit. And that's what counts in this kind of art. We need this kind of joy, this testing of our human limits, this escape from the old routines. This is a venture that fills a profound need, which we all share.
Okay, we'll walk down at Kaneohe at 1400 exactly. We'll bring the 6 planes, Steve, in behind the crowd, and I'll drop you and skip off. We'll be in the 360 around this hotel. Since the flight line is
Each
so
Blue
long
Angels
here,
show is more than a repeated performance. The careful planning before getting into these aircraft covers a long checklist. At each site, you need a new set of answers. What's the terrain? Where is the center of the performance? How do we find each other in 700 cubic miles of sky? What are the call signals? What do we do in an emergency? There's no way to pre-package that kind of show.
Again, the flight line starts just to the outside of the buildings there on Diamond Head and parallels the yacht harbor over here on the right. The important things, I think, are these big, tall TV antennas over here, which give us a real problem. When you are at the show site, it's very easy to survey it and determine where your obstacles are located. I try to take a helicopter or light aircraft ride at every show site, even though I'm flying in, flying around the show site. That enables me to get a very good feel for what the obstacles are going to be, where my various checkpoints lie.
You can't put a Blue Angels performance in a can and have it come out the same every time. There's no way to package it. Every time out, it's new. Every place is new. You have to find your own point of reference every time.
Where to get Paul around here now?
In the formation business, when all of a sudden somebody gets a little closer to somebody else, or maybe even scrapes a little paint off on another airplane, that probably is a good reminder to one another that you are in there playing a very serious game and that you can't afford to let things like that happen, which is good. And maybe it's good that things like that happen now and then, because you just can't get too familiar with this kind of work.
Coming left trail. Yep. Yeah, I'll give you a pretty good run in here. Okay, boss. I'll go flat on him, Jim.
The biggest problem on the Waikiki show was the tremendous turbulence that we encountered. Probably more severe than it was more severe than I've encountered anywhere at any air show site, which just meant the formation had to be loosened up considerably to fly the maneuvers safely.
Okay, let's be real smooth on this. A little bumpy across the inverters. Yeah, I would say it's going to be a little bumpy down there. Hold on for it.
By now, you see, this is not merely speaking about flying. This is every high-performance challenge we have ever accepted, every threshold we have ever tried to cross. This is mortal human reaching for that harmony found in perfection. It surprises some people that we could ever build such fantastic machines as these, and having built them, that we could do such extraordinary things with them. This creature of the skies loses its mechanical identity. It reaches for those limits which we strive for with music, with dance, with painting, with sculpture. This man-machine being creates sculpture on the sky. This is an exercise in being alive.
Travel continuously through those 8 to 10 months, putting on at least 2 shows a week, always on the weekend, and sometimes as many as 3 shows. It's a very long grind.
When your time belongs to everyone else, to the show, to the audience, to the travels, going home takes on a very special meaning. You know what it's like to have your own time. The Blue Angels' work is public drama, yet a very private experience for each pilot. People who share such experiences tend to keep their own company, even at home.
And we do things as a team. We fly together, we work together, and it's a closeness that we have here on the team that you wouldn't get in the normal type squadron or any other type organization. Possibly the astronauts have that type of closeness when they get their 3 team members to go to the moon.
I think to describe the other members of the team, let's say individually, every one of them is different, and yet they all have something that's the same about every one of them.
Okay, back out a little bit.
Okay, in that area, right there.
All right, hold. This one, I catch it best with design. What are propellers on? You ready?
Hold it, not doing a thing.
Okay.
Cruise right in there, right?
How tight, I wonder? I don't know. I imagine it'd be good enough for a one-time only if I don't.
Every man the Lone Eagle, every man the first one here in this virgin sky. And back there on the mystic horizon, the Red Baron and his dastardly cohorts. And sure enough, Paris, just beyond the next cloud. Mademoiselle from Armentières. And gone is all of the hinky-dink of today. Yeah. And in the witchery of that moment before the world turns dark, one can almost see that straight line through time between science and superstition. And all bets are off on what is real and what is not. Reality for the Blue Angels often takes the form of hard mountains hidden in soft clouds. And all of this too close to the show site, the way it is here in South America. The show at Quito, Ecuador, is from a field at an altitude of 10,000 feet. The brutally patient, cloud-enshrouded mountains wait on all sides. Thin air, rapidly changing cloud and weather conditions here are among the worst in the world, worse than anyone on the team imagined. But when you promise to perform a show, that's what you do. The show goes on.
I don't believe there's any place in the whole show season that we were more welcome, more warmly received. The language barrier might have been a problem, but the smiles, the showed friendship, and that you could tell very easily that they were happy for us to be there. And I think, again, this made all of us feel a great deal prouder.
Es muy agradable el saber que quienes en el film hacían esas grandes demostraciones están con nosotros y que no son tan ángeles ni tan distantes como para no poder conversar con ellos. La barrera del idioma también, con un pequeño esfuerzo, trataremos de interpretar las preguntas que quisieran hacer ustedes y vamos a empezar por Steve. What's your full name?
Steve Shoemaker.
Steve Shoemaker. Usually your name is Steve.
Steve.
Usualmente el nombre que como le llaman a él es Steve. How old are you right now?
I'm 29.
29, sure?
I'm positive.
Thank you, Steve. Ahora vamos con Ernest. ¿Está casado? Are you married?
No, I'm not. I'm very much single.
Está muy solterito. También es otra buena noticia que tienen quienes admiran a este otro ángel azul.
Captain Mara, can you tell me something about the maximum speed of the airplane?
Yes, sir. The Phantom is capable of about 1,600 miles an hour, or 2.5 times the speed of sound.
Damas y caballeros, se ha iniciado el decolaje de Los Ángeles Azules. La escuadrilla original dio perfeccionamiento al famoso diamante de Los Ángeles Azules, que luego se convirtió en el distintivo de...
The air show at Quito, it was an attention getter, you might say, in that anytime you have mountains on either side and the mountains merge with the clouds, I'm not scared to go into a cloud. It's when you're just not sure where the ground is and you're trying to maneuver. And naturally, if you do go into a cloud during an air show, you're going to have to pop out the bottom right away. And if you don't know where you are and if there's a lot of hills around, then naturally you're going to have to be very careful or you're going to end up fatality.
Efectuado por los 4 aviones del MiG.
If for any reason you get into trouble on this one, just get into burner and go right straight up over the hill.
You try to pull the plane around at that altitude like you normally do at sea level where most of our air shows are flown. Well, when you pull the plane harder, it just shudders and it doesn't go anywhere. You kill off your airspeed, plus you don't have the power response at that altitude, so you've really got to be on top of everything, flying an air show under those conditions.
You notice that one big black cloud over the field? Okay, I'm trying to keep us under the clouds here, Ben. Okay. I will end up flying a lot of air shows in this kind of weather. Water maneuver. Okay. Easing the power. And low power on you, 180. Okay, hold what you got, wingies, right there. Cooling out real smooth now, descending. Boss, hold it, please. I've lost contact. Say again? I've lost. Hey, let's get Steve up VHF. I can't hear any of his clouds. Or get him up UHF. Where are you, Steve? Where are you, boss?
We are faced with a 10,000-foot base altitude with a 22,000-foot mountain rising up to one side that is totally enshrouded in clouds. And my task was to come down a valley to continue with the opener. And I found myself in Afterburner, trying to come around the corner Unfortunately, I did go into the clouds there as I was approaching this ravine, and I kept saying to myself, well, you're going to break out any moment now. You're going to break out. Everything's going to be all right. And then I thought to myself, well, that's probably the last thing. The last pilot thought that went into the ground was that I'm going to break out any moment now. However, I did break out of the clouds, and I was in the ravine, and everything did work out.
Okay, I've got him back, boss. We're ready to go. Okay, that's fun. Wonder if Tappy Toes has updated his will lately.
We ran into some problems with attempting to put on a remote show with the 800 to 1,000 foot overcast and driving rain, and attempting to roll in and out of some of the maneuvers. Going right into a thunderstorm type environment is rather a hairy condition that low to the ground.
After 3 maneuvers, my mouth was just like cotton, completely dry. I was perspiring much more than I do on practice ops.
We came in and did our maneuver, and it turned out that they were right behind us to do their 4-point cross. In effect, it looked like about a 6-point cross.
Which is spectacular about that one is it was not really an exceptional cross, and yet it dazzled so many people. Have all 6 airplanes right there at one time. They could have been upside down, or it looked like a Ringling Brothers Flying Circus or something.
We had just messed up on the timing.
So we just continued on in and did it.
Now, that was certainly different. That was pretty good.
The air show was most enjoyable for us to fly because we were virtually unrestricted in the type of maneuvers we could fly. The crowd was so large, 1 million people, that it was impossible to fly an air show without overflying someone at some point in time. When you are allowed to cross, for instance, directly in front of the crowd, then it's quite a thrill for the people, particularly in the crowd, to see something like this.
The reception that we got from the people, I thought, was unbelievable. Their response is, I would say, at a much, much higher level than even in the United States. Crowd reception afterwards at the end of the air show, when we landed and shut down, and we had that long walk across that field, charging through that crowd was probably the most difficult thing that I've done all year on the team. It almost reached a state or a level of you were almost scared for your own security. People mobbed you, and it was, but still a very friendly and loving atmosphere.
But when you get out and the people are just so overwhelmed, and there's nothing like a Latin crowd to show excitement.
That's it. 15 minutes of glory and the cold morning after. Packing to go home. Going home. This has been the last show for this team, this unique being which never existed before and will never exist again. Steve and Ernie are leaving the team. Their 2 years are up. If they wished to stay, they could not. 2 novice Blue Angels named Switzer and Beardsley will move into the vacancies. But that means it will be another team. Going home, the old team is dying. But a new team is on the way.
I'm gonna miss it. You don't think about it when you're in the air. You're still thinking so hard about flying the damn flight that you don't think about last flight until you've touched down and you're slowing down. You say, "It's all over, babes. It's all over."
I won't miss some things, but I'll miss most things. I won't miss living out of a suitcase for 280 days out of the year as much as I miss the teamwork. Couldn't ask for better flying.
Never again will I fly on the knife edge, the threshold of absolute control of myself and my universe.
This is the crucible where all of that perfection begins. This is winter training, a new beginning. Winter training is where the fledglings hit the fan and high-flying thoughts come down to earth. It's a rude awakening. First, every time up there at that raw edge of ability and endurance, every time is a new time, a first time. Here's where you learn that this challenge will never change. From here on out, you'll be living on that magic edge, right up against the limits, where if you dare look beyond, you're staring directly into the unknown. Second, you learn what concentration really means. And third, you learn that all thresholds are really inside yourself.
Coming over the left wing. East of the barn, I'll be thinking about your tuck under. I was looking at it almost head on, and there was an unbelievable mismatch in the wings. Yeah, you were slow on the top. Yeah. That last one was very unloaded there, Burner, but you're going to get those, and you got to fly them. Really, you almost had a 45-degree mismatch on the wings there at one time. I was up at the, trying to roll in place at 1 negative G up there at the top, and you just can't do it. That was quite a roll there, boss. Yeah, that's really bad news, huh? You're stopping your roll, and then all you're doing with your wings is you're pushing down and letting them roll around you. I sure hope you can see it, because I sure can. Don't you recognize that? Well, I couldn't recognize the wing mismatch that time. I knew something was not right. However, I was staying in the same position on Kevin, which indicated I had the same roll. What's the matter, Bernie? You tired? Well, I don't know, boss. That was a real weird feeling roll to me. I could not, when you said that, Jim, I tried to analyze which way my wings were mismatched because I had the stick position and I was maintaining the exact same position on Kevin for quite a bit of that roll, although it was not the right position. You really had it mismatched. Well, which way were they mismatched? It's really evident that you're riding that whole damn formation deep, Brenner. Okay, Dick. I didn't see as much cycling as I did the fact that you just were sitting deep in the maneuver. You knew to sit a little bit deeper than anybody else, Burner, and during the maneuver you were deep at the pull-up, and about through the 90 you drove it acute and stayed acute for the entire maneuver. Oh, you better stand by this time there, Irishman. Again, boss? I said you better stand by this time. Oh, boy.
When a bumped airplane comes back, it's a center of attention. Everybody wants to see the 600-mile-per-hour bad mark. No way to hide a mistake in this school. No way. A bad mark, everybody sees it. And it has a very serious meaning.
Okay, remember what we talked about on this echelon landing, Bill. You cannot drop deep. The best thing to have going for you if you're going to err is to be slightly aft, moving slightly forward with your power up. But again, you're really going to set yourself up if you overcorrect and have to pull off power. But you pull power in close, you're going to drop him into the overrun.
Timing, basically, on most of the maneuvers was real close today. When we do that over the field, we'll be on the runway, and the objective is you want the crowd to just see these two airplanes just zoom up out of the ground. Get into the point where you hear me go by, and you know that you're just about there. You don't want to get much closer than that I was. The vertical rolls, I think, maybe a little bit behind me. I don't know how it looked to you. On the pull-up? On the pull-up. Yeah. Instead of getting this, it looked to me like if this is you, that we got about like that.
Upside down, just above the desert floor. This is Skip Umstead from St. Charles, Michigan, who graduated 76th in his high school class of 206 students. That was in 1960. Since then, he has learned to concentrate. Cautiously, slowly, wide apart at first, then moving in. Many yards away, then feet away, then mere inches. You think about 4, then 6 airplanes flying inches apart at 600 miles per hour. It's a form of glorious insanity. And how appropriate that it all happens against a desert moonscape, as strange and forbidding as the very edges of the imagination.
I know that there are, or I've heard that there have been accidents, and there's a few airplanes out there in the desert. But it's the old thing, you know, the typical fighter pilot outlook that it can't happen to me, and I think that's probably the thing that keeps most of us going in the profession. And all you can do is just hope that it doesn't to you.
What's in the outback of a pilot's mind? In that region of nightmare images, which must never interfere with the business at hand? What's locked behind those plate steel doors of consciousness, all sealed in fancy words, not to be opened until that final split instant, when you know you've gone over the edge, and the real limits, which you knew were there all the time, have caught up with you?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God, get it up.
There is a state of mental and physical awareness in which I and my airplane are one. There is no separation between us. My will is its will. My movements are reflected by its movements, and my thoughts are only of it. When I am in this special place, there is no room for the luxury of fatigue or fear. There is no moment, there is no movement that does not demand total concentration. Rising skyward like blue angels, we are borne on wings of fire.
to new heights of inspiration on the threshold of the sky. Kind of men who long to reach above the earth and touch the heavens with their hands. Rising skyward like true angels, they are born on wings of fire to new heights of inspiration on the threshold of the sky.
It's Fred Albert. Yeah. Come on, big fella, it's time to shake. Bounce your big belly up in the air. Come on, jump, 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 jump. It's all for you. And right on, I saw you a thing or two. That's the fun now, with me and all the gang. Around each other, while we do our thing. Make you feel alright. Shake your body in the party that we're having tonight. Hey, you wanna dance a lot? Find a reason to jump around and move your stuff. Hey, I like to stop. Now come on with me, let's just break it down like na 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 na. We're gonna have a good time. That's my name. It's all been published, my game. Now get it done if you feel it, what I'm saying. No delaying. Hey, man. I'm so happy, so glad I wanna check myself. Pinch myself. Look at me, I love myself. And since that's where it's at, I don't wanna get skinny. For what? I like the bigger